Hello and welcome to the West Asia Post. I am your host Ghadi Francis, back for our weekly broadcast from the world's most volatile region. Up in flames again after 6 weeks of fighting and globally denounced violence, Israel and Hamas have finally come to a temporary ceasefire agreement. A hostage deal has been sealed. We have a lineup and we will talk about all this in this episode. But first, let's take a quick look at the headlines.
The 4-day pause in fighting takes effect in the Gaza Strip. First batch of 13 hostages to be released by Hamas in exchange of 39 Palestinian detainees. Israeli forces arrest director of the Al-Shifa hospital, accusing him of playing a role in the facility's alleged use by Hamas militants. Iranian foreign minister visits Beirut, meets with Hamas chief Hassan Nasrallah. Both discuss the situation in Palestine and the Lebanese front.
After weeks of negotiations that almost did not make it, a Gaza hostage deal has been finalized. Hamas agreed to release 50 of the October 7 hostages in exchange for Palestinians detained in Israeli prisons and a 4-day humanitarian truce. Now, how did this much welcomed agreement come into being, and who were the players? Our next report explains.
Seven weeks of indiscriminate fighting. 49 days of waiting. 49 nights of horror. 15,000 Palestinians and 1,200 Israelis killed since the October 7 attack. It is the biggest moment in the Israel-Hamas war. A temporary ceasefire agreed to by the warring parties has brought relative calm over Gaza as people process these moments without the shattering sound of shrieking bombs and missiles. This week, the hostage deal promised the release of 50 hostages, mainly women and children, in return for 150 Palestinian detainees. Both sides also agreed to silence their guns and bombs for 4 days. For the 2 million plus residents of Gaza, the deal is a respite from weeks of sustained Israeli bombardment. For others, it is a hope of being reunited with children, parents and spouses, a promising lull for both the Jews and the Arabs.
We hope this ceasefire will be good. We have been waiting for this ceasefire. We have been hoping for it. We pray for peace for all people so we can be done with all these challenges we are facing. We have been fleeing from one place to another. We hope the ceasefire will be good and that we will see positive solutions from this.
Hoping everybody is safe to some degree and is being kept healthy, and we're hoping to see them soon as we can. But every person that comes home is a huge thing.
Hamas has given its list of 50 hostages to be released in the first phase. It did not publicly announce the names, but said they will all be women and children. The list itself had been a big hurdle in securing the deal. When Hamas had refused to divulge information, it was only when Washington relayed to Doha that withholding information is a deal breaker did Hamas offer the details just to Qatar. Israel also published the names of 300 Palestinians, half of whom could be released should the truce outlive the initial 4-day period. Over 30 names on the list are women, and more than 260 children and teenagers under 19. Most of those listed are residents of West Bank, only a small number belong to Gaza. They face varying challenges from holding protests to carrying out arson attacks against Israeli guards. During the truce period, Israel will let in some 308 trucks pass through Egypt into Gaza. The aid convoys will bring fuel, water, food and medicines, along with emergency supplies to the unfortunate city. American officials say the groundwork for talks began soon after the Israeli offensive began in Gaza. Multiple countries were involved, spy masters and leaders each playing an active role along with Qatar and the US, the mentors of Hamas in Israel.
It's actually the Qataris who had approached the White House shortly after the October 7th attacks that they had some information, they had an ability to potentially secure the release of hostages. So ever since then, very senior officials in the White House, President Biden, and leaders in Qatar as well as Israel have been working, or almost around the clock for parameters of an agreement that could secure the release of these hostages.
The release of 2 American-Israeli women was the pilot project in this mission, a proof to all the players that a larger deal was possible. It was only after Qatar mediated the initial release that work on the deal started in right earnest. However, everything wasn't a smooth ride. Multiple talking heads were involved. Mossad had to relay information to Israeli forces and the government. The US delegation had to pay it back to Washington. The process was painfully protracted, the messages passing from Doha to Cairo to Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar in Gaza and then back again. After the strikes that continued till the last second of the truce, the lull in fighting has ignited hope in traumatized Gazan minds. The displaced say they want to return home even if it is mere rubble. But the Israeli army has made it plain and clear, this is just a temporary pause. The fighting will resume and northern Gaza will remain a war front where movement is restricted. Questions now remain about the second phase of the hostage deal. Does Hamas have enough hostages alive to extend the truce, to leverage the return of more Palestinian detainees? And if alive, whether they are in its captivity or with other militant groups? For now, the first phase has held world leaders, observers and people on all sides hoping the truce will sustain a non-violent way forward and not remain just a mere blip on an unrelenting landscape of devastation.
Destruction, similar to a massive natural disaster, has ravaged Gaza. Hundreds of thousands have been displaced, rendered homeless. Winter is setting in on the besieged strip. Now, dropping temperatures present new, harsher challenges for the people. What do the coming months look like for the Gazans? Here's a report.
As the sun sets in Gaza, the temperature begins to drop. November rain has brought with it a chilly winter for the Strip. It used to be about children seeing rains as fun time. People stealing moments of happiness and carefree smiles. Today's realities have changed that. Parts of Gaza have been bombed to rubble. Hundreds and thousands have been displaced, rendered homeless by a continuous Israeli onslaught.
We don't know what to do. We survived the bombardment, but we will not survive the winter and rain. Our children will get sick. The entire tent is filled with rainwater.
We were warm in our home, but we came here in the wind and the rain. We can't even find covers for our children. They shiver at night with the sunset and the wind, and then it starts getting cold for our children. How long will this go on for?
The traumatized population has been on the move since the start of the war, sheltering in hospitals or walking from the north to the south, and in some cases back again. In Rafah, there are hundreds of Palestinians crying, struggling to buy winter clothes for their children.
People fled with summer clothes, not winter clothes, when they were displaced from north to south. Everyone is looking for winter clothes, but winter goods haven't arrived.
I'm heartbroken when I see my children in the cold, in the street, wearing short-sleeved shirts. I'm heartbroken when I leave school where they took shelter. I pray I don't see them wearing short-sleeved shirts and coughing. No one is helping us. No country is helping us.
For millions already suffering, the onset of winter presents even more challenges and dangers. WHO warns of visible worrying trends of spread of disease in Gaza. The World Health Body said bombardments and a ground offensive have disrupted the health system and hit access to clean water. It has caused crowding in makeshift shelters.
We are extremely concerned as well about the spread of diseases. Rainy season, winter arrived, overcrowding in the shelter, the unrushed shelters, but all the makeshift shelters as well, lack of water and sanitation, etc. And the Ministry of Health, UNRWA and WHO, recorded already over 70,000 cases of acute respiratory infections, over 44,000 cases of diarrhea, 808 cases of chickenpox, and more than 14,200 skin rashes, scabies and lice, and some hepatitis A.
With the start of the winter season and subsequent rains, areas in Gaza are flooded. There's a real possibility that the enclave's sewage system will be overwhelmed soon. And once that happens, containing the spread of diseases will be harder than imagined. There is water, but not much that can be used. Israel's fuel blockade has forced shutdowns of Gaza's sewage pumping stations and desalination plants. The water is getting increasingly contaminated.
There's no medication or proper water. I'm fed up with this life. Why is this happening to us? Why is this our situation? My medication is almost finished. How am I going to buy more medication while there are no salaries, no money? Shall I beg on the street? Even those whom I will beg for money, they themselves need the money.
Winters are usually a happy time in Gaza. It is when the young and old alike soak in the winter sun. But this year, the friendly weather will make matters worse. It will contribute to more deaths. The spread of disease will claim lives, just as the Israeli strikes have done.
Tensions are escalating between Lebanon and Israel. 2 journalists were killed in an Israeli airstrike this week. Beirut is saying that the IDF is assassinating its journalists, while Hezbollah vowed revenge for the brutal attack. Here's a report.
Lebanon is in mourning. This week, Israeli strikes killed 2 of its young journalists in Deir Harfa, a town nearly a mile away from the front. Al Mayadeen correspondent Farah Omar was killed along with her camera person, Rabi Al-Mamari.
Israel killed Rabia and killed Farah, our 25-year-old journalist. This young lady who went there, she was sitting all by herself under a tree. Nothing was there. There were no rockets, there were no army, there was no Hezbollah, there were no resistance. Farah was sitting there under a tree on a plastic chair all by herself with Rami Mamari, and they were shot.
The deaths have sparked anger in the Mediterranean country. Al Mayadeen has accused Israel of deliberately targeting the TV crew. The channel believes Israel attacked its journalists for its pro-Palestinian stance. The pan-Arab Al Mayadeen TV is politically allied with the Lebanese militant group Hezbollah. Last week, Israel banned the channel from broadcast in the Jewish country.
In the span of a month and a half, we have more than 50 Palestinian and Lebanese martyrs. You at Reuters have the martyr Issam Abdallah, who was the first martyr to be killed in this war in the south, which means that the enemy has a campaign to erase evidence. Erase the narrative that says it is carrying out massacres and ethnic cleansing in Gaza. Their first enemy after fighters are journalists who are telling the truth and exposing them. Al-Mayadeen was playing this part, and then the ban came. The war on it started in Palestine after their broadcast was banned, and Al-Mayadeen is targeted like the rest of the free media outlets who are aware that Israel is an enemy and not a point of view in the Arab world.
The Israeli military claims it was aware of the presence of the journalists. It also said their presence was dangerous in an area that is close to the border with active hostilities and frequent exchanges of fire.
Journalists should know that Israel is targeting them and persecuting them, and it wants to silence the voice of the truth. And they break our pencils, break our lenses, and prevent eyes from spreading the truth about the crimes it is committing in Gaza, the West Bank and southern Lebanon.
The killings have caused a massive outcry in Lebanon. Caretaker Prime Minister Najib Mikati accused Israel of assassinating its people. He said the aggression proves there are no limits to the crimes of Israel, that has no scruples in silencing the media revealing its crimes. Hezbollah has pledged revenge against Israel. In its statement, the group said the killing of the journalists will not pass without retaliation. Hostilities between Hezbollah and Israel have sparked tensions of a spillover. The escalations have been on the rise. On Wednesday, the son of a Hezbollah parliamentarian and 4 other militants were killed in crossfire. In a statement, the group said Abbas Raad, the son of the head of Hezbollah's parliamentary bloc, Mohammad Raad, was martyred on the road to Jerusalem. According to AFP, 107 people have been killed on the Lebanese side in the last 6 weeks. At least 75 were Hezbollah fighters and 14 were civilians, including journalists.
The COP28 was supposed to be a landmark moment for West Asia. Dubai is hosting the UN conference this week, but as opposed to what was expected, the climate talks will be overshadowed by the unraveling war in the neighborhood. In our next report, we talk about how the Israel-Gaza war has derailed any climate action plans in the region.
– 2023 was not supposed to turn out like this for West Asia. The region that had been championing truces and looking at tantalizing prospects of normalization. People were talking about the future and the challenges in tackling global warming. But 10 months into the year, all that has been blown away. West Asia, that was all set to host the United Nations Climate Summit next week, is plunged into a massive crisis. The Israel-Gaza war has taken the focus away from the existential human threat, global warming. First comes the economic cost of the war. The effect of the Gaza conflict on the global economy at present is minimal, but a prolonged war and a wider spread could change all that. According to the International Monetary Fund, a spillover can trigger an unprecedented spike in oil prices and derail global growth. Conflict-driven spikes will once again trump energy transition initiatives and deepen the status quo on the use of harmful fossil fuels. It will further dent the ability and willingness of the richer countries to help the less endowed, climate-ravaged nations, especially those in West Asia, a region mired in conflicts and climate risks. Besieged by Israeli forces, the Gaza Strip has seen the climate crisis up close. The isolated enclave of 2 million people faces climate threats amplified by war and instability. The region witnessed lengthy periods of drought every year. Agricultural production is dropping drastically. Earlier it was the Israeli occupation laws, and now it is the bombing. A significant part of Gaza is reduced to rubble by the Israel and Hamas war. The talks ahead of COP28 have already been fraught. There were lesser agreements this year, and now there is a new hurdle: West Asian instability. This year, the Israeli Prime Minister was supposed to attend the talks in UAE. He was supposed to share space with the biggest ever climate delegation. The attendance was supposed to be an example of increasing Arab-Jewish integrity. But now there are doubts if Netanyahu will visit Dubai at the end of the year. His delegation will be there, but fiercely faced down. As it is expected, so will be the commitments on fossil fuel. West Asia is among the regions worst hit by climate change. Increasingly arid conditions, unbearably high temperatures, the steady decline in rainfall has aggravated the region's problems. From Gaza to Yemen to Syria and Iraq, this conference comes as a reminder of how climate action and conflicts are tightly linked. An omnipresent warning for the world leaders to act before it gets any worse and too late.
That's all we have for you on this episode of the West Asia Post. We will be back next week with a brand new lineup, always bringing you the latest updates from one of the world's most volatile regions. I am your host, Ghadi Francis, signing off from Beirut. For more global news, keep on watching WION. World is One.